Christmas Eve should have sounded like carols, but instead, it was silence, broken only by the steady tick of my silver pocket watch. Across the table, Derek slid a thick envelope toward me, his eyes colder than the snow falling outside. Inside were bank papers, already bearing my forged signature. For a moment, the world tilted, and in the distance, sirens wailed faintly through the frozen night. My own son's voice cut deeper than any blade, "You'll answer for this." How could my own blood turn me over like a criminal? Backhand index pointing right. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where you're watching from right now. The morning after, I tried to pretend it was just another Christmas day. Snow clung to the window panes, muting the world outside, while the kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. I set out the mugs, poured steaming coffee, and placed my silver pocket watch carefully on the mantel, the same way I always did. Its tick was a small comfort, steady, patient, like a heartbeat reminding me that time still belonged to me. But something in the air was wrong, heavy, as though the warmth of the house had been drained overnight. Derek came down the stairs, his footsteps brisk, his shoulders squared like he was walking into an office rather than his father's home. "You didn't clear the driveway," he muttered, brushing past me toward the fridge. "No, Merry Christmas." No smile. Just an irritated tone, sharp as glass. I said nothing, only sipped my coffee, the bitter heat grounding me. I told myself it was nothing, that he was tired, stressed, maybe worried about bills. But then Amanda followed, her perfume strong, her voice already raised in complaint. "Honestly, William, you still keep that thing?" She gestured at my watch on the mantel as if it were clutter, some relic to be tossed in the trash. "It was your mother's gift to me," I said quietly, not taking my eyes off the ticking hands. Amanda smirked, opening the fridge with a loud snap. "Well, it's broken anyway. Just like everything else around here." The word stung more than I wanted to admit. Broken. That's what she saw when she looked at me, not a man who had worked 40 years, not a father who had carried his family through hardship, but an old object taking up space. Derek poured himself juice without asking if I wanted any. When I reached for the newspaper folded neatly on the table, he snatched it first, scanning the headlines while standing, leaving me staring at my empty hands. "Anything good?" I asked, forcing my voice steady. He didn't look up. "You wouldn't understand half of it." Amanda laughed softly. "You still pay for that subscription? Such a waste of money." I pressed my fingers against the edge of the table, holding myself still. These weren't shouts or accusations, no, these were smaller cuts. 1,000 tiny blades, a smirk here, a dismissive word there, each one carving into my dignity. The house felt strange, too. Decorations hung on the tree, but it was Amanda's taste: silver ribbons, glass ornaments, no handmade pieces, none of the old family baubles Martha had treasured. Even the star was new, brighter but emptier, like the plastic glow of a store window. I caught myself remembering Martha's gentle laugh as she fixed crooked ornaments, her hands always brushing against mine. That memory sat with me like a ghost while my son and his wife moved around my kitchen as if I were the guest. I stood to fetch the second pot of coffee, but Derek waved me off. "Don't bother. Amanda doesn't like it burnt the way you make it." The casual cruelty of it stunned me. Burnt. I'd made coffee the same way for decades, every morning, even when I was working double shifts at the factory. To them, it was nothing worth respect. Amanda sat down finally, scrolling through her phone, barely glancing at me. "You know," she said, her tone airy but sharp beneath, "you really should consider selling this place. Downsizing. It's too much for you now. Derek and I could help with the paperwork." Derek nodded without looking up from the paper. "Yeah, Dad. It's not practical anymore. Too many repairs, too much space for one man." I stared at the pocket watch on the mantel. Its steady tick was the only sound that didn't feel hostile. "This is my home," I said softly. I built every wall. Your mother's hands planted that garden out back. Don't talk to me about practicality. Derek folded the paper with a snap, finally meeting my eyes. Times change. And there it was again, that cold distance, as if I were no longer the father who raised him but an obstacle in his way. I forced myself to swallow down the bitterness. I wasn't ready to argue, not yet. I tried to remind myself it was Christmas. The day Martha had always called sacred, the day she insisted we set aside grievances and remember love. I tried, for her sake. But the silence stretched, brittle and sharp. Derek and Amanda spoke in low tones to each other, not including me. Their laughter sounded different, not the laughter of family but of conspirators sharing a joke. I busied myself with small things, straightening a chair, adjusting a curtain, polishing the glass of the pocket watch with my thumb. Yet the unease grew heavier with each passing minute. At one point, Amanda leaned close to Derek, whispering something. He chuckled, glancing at me, then looked away quickly when our eyes met. My stomach tightened. What secret did they share? What part of me had become their private amusement? When I tried to join in, asked about the children, about Derek's work, Amanda waved the questions away. They're fine. Work is fine. Nothing you'd get. Her tone was final, a door slammed shut in my face. By noon, the house no longer felt like mine. I drifted from room to room, touching the old wood banister, the photographs on the wall, all the remnants of Martha's presence. I tried to draw strength from them, but the air felt colder with each step. As I passed the living room, I noticed the watch had been moved slightly on the mantel. Just an inch, no more. Yet it unsettled me deeply. I had placed it carefully, as I always did. Now it leaned at an odd angle, as if someone had touched it, disrespected even that small sanctuary of memory. I straightened it, my fingers lingering on the cool metal. The tick sounded louder in the stillness. And in that moment, I realized something simple but terrifying: this was no longer a place of comfort. It was a place where my every movement was observed, judged, dismissed. That night, when the laughter finally faded upstairs, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the pocket watch. Its ticking was steady, but the silence between ticks felt heavier, like a void growing wider each second. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, that families fought, that respect could be rebuilt. But deep down, in the marrow of my bones, I felt it: something had shifted. This house, once filled with warmth, no longer recognized me as its master. And for the first time, the walls themselves seemed to whisper, "You don't belong here anymore." The next evening, I came down to the dining room expecting at least the pretense of Christmas cheer. Martha had always insisted on long meals during the holidays, candles lit, good china set, laughter rising over the table. But this time, the candles flickered like shadows, and the air was so heavy it seemed to press against my chest. Amanda was already seated, her nails tapping on the table like a clock wound too tightly. Derek poured wine, avoiding my eyes. My silver pocket watch rested in my hand, its familiar weight grounding me. I thumbed the lid open and closed, listening to the faint tick as though it could remind me that order still existed somewhere in this house. Then I heard Amanda whisper sharply to Derek, thinking I wasn't close enough to catch it. "He either signs, or he's out. Tonight." My stomach turned cold. I set the watch down beside my plate, the ticking louder than the sound of cutlery. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence that gnaws at the edges of patience. Finally, Amanda cleared her throat, her voice sugary but sharp underneath. "William, there's some paperwork we'd like you to review after dinner. Just a formality. To make things easier for everyone." I looked up slowly. "What sort of paperwork?" Derek's eyes narrowed. "Household finances. Savings transfers. We thought it would be best if everything was centralized." "Centralized under whose name?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Amanda's smile widened, brittle and bright. For the family, of course. Derek will handle it. You don't need the stress anymore. I tapped the watch lid against the table, click click, each sound echoing like a warning. And if I don't agree? The smile vanished. Amanda leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Then maybe this arrangement isn't working. Maybe you'd be more comfortable elsewhere. It was an ultimatum, thinly veiled but unmistakable. For a moment, I simply stared at the watch face, the second hand circling with mechanical precision. Time didn't hesitate. But my son did. He looked at me like a stranger might, eyes full of calculation, not love. I built this home, I said quietly. Every brick, every board. Your mother's touch is in every corner. And you would ask me to walk away? Derek finally spoke, his tone clipped. It's not about asking. It's about what's practical. You can either cooperate, or you can make this harder than it needs to be. Amanda reached across, sliding a folder onto the table. Sign tonight. It's simple. The folder sat between us like a loaded gun. My pocket watch ticked beside it, a duel of symbols, one a memory of love and legacy, the other a demand for betrayal. I didn't touch the folder. Instead, I pushed back my chair, the scrape of wood loud against the floor. You think you can corner me at my own table? My voice was calm, but it shook with the weight of years. Amanda's lips curled. It's not your table anymore, William. It's ours. The words hit harder than any slap. The room seemed to shrink. The smell of roasted ham and cloves turned sour in my nose. For the first time, I saw clearly, their respect was gone. What remained was greed wrapped in false civility. I won't sign, I said flatly. Amanda's eyes narrowed. Derek exhaled, as if bracing for the fight he knew was coming. Before either of them could answer, the sound of a voice drifted in through the open window. Evening, Mr. William. Everything all right in there? I turned. Outside, Mrs. Green stood on her porch, arms folded against the cold. Her gaze flicked between me and the table where the folder lay. Neighbors had a way of noticing when something wasn't right, and whispers traveled faster than snowmelt in our town. Amanda's face tightened. Derek muttered, "Close the window." But Mrs. Green had already seen too much. She tilted her head, her voice carrying. "We heard you might be selling the place. Shame, after all these years." I didn't answer her, just closed the curtain slowly. But I knew what it meant. Whatever happened in this house tonight would not stay within its walls. Amanda hissed under her breath, "See what you've done? People are already talking. If you don't sign, you'll make us all look like fools." The pocket watch ticked on, a small, steady defiance. I stood taller, looking at my son, not as a father seeking love, but as a man confronting betrayal. If the choice is to betray myself or leave, then you already know my answer. Amanda slammed her hand against the table. This isn't a choice, William, it's the only way forward. But I only picked up the watch, closing it with a sharp snap. The sound rang like judgment. Mrs. Green's voice lingered in my ears, the weight of gossip already spreading through the neighborhood. Whatever came next, it would no longer be private. And as I turned from the table, one truth settled over me like the falling snow outside. Their ultimatum wasn't a request, it was a sentence. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Derek's voice downstairs, low but edged with anger. I lingered on the landing for a moment, listening. Papers rustled. Amanda muttered something about timelines and deadlines. The words didn't sound like family talk, they sounded like a board meeting in crisis. I descended slowly, the silver pocket watch cool in my hand. Its ticking reassured me, though each step felt heavier than the last. When I entered the kitchen, Derek was at the table, a neat stack of bills and bank statements spread before him. Amanda leaned against the counter, arms crossed, her smile thin and victorious. "Morning, Dad," Derek said, his tone too sharp to be casual. He pushed the pile toward me. "Recognize any of these?" I sat down, the chair creaking beneath me, and scanned the top page. My heart jolted. The electric bill, overdue. Insurance notices, cancelled. A letter from the bank about insufficient funds. "These can't be right," I murmured. "I paid every bill this month." Amanda chuckled softly, cruel amusement in her voice. "Did you, though? Because according to the bank, some of your payments didn't go through. Strange, isn't it?" I turned to Derek, searching his face for the boy I once knew. "What did you do?" He leaned back, folding his arms. "What I had to do. You've been careless for too long, Dad. We stepped in. We made sure things were redirected." Redirected? The word felt like poison in my mouth. Amanda tapped one manicured nail against the folder. "Don't act surprised. You've been struggling. We only did what was necessary. You should be thanking us." My chest tightened. "You forged my signature." Neither of them denied it. Derek's silence was answer enough. I reached instinctively for the watch, setting it on the table between us. The ticking filled the silence like a judge's gavel. "Do you have any idea what you've done? These accounts, this isn't just money. This is my name. My reputation." Amanda smirked. "Oh, please. Reputation doesn't pay the bills. Derek has plans. Investments. Real opportunities. You're just clinging to old ways that don't work anymore." I shook my head slowly. "This isn't about opportunity. It's theft." Derek slammed his fist against the table, startling even himself. "It's survival." The papers fluttered from the force, one sliding across the floor. I bent to pick it up and froze. A check, drawn in my name, but the handwriting wasn't mine. My stomach dropped. "How long?" My voice was low, cold. Amanda tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Long enough to know you wouldn't notice. You're too busy polishing that old watch." The insult burned deeper than I expected. She had reduced my last tie to Martha, the rhythm of my days, into a punchline. I held the check between my fingers, the ink glaring back at me like an open wound. "You've been draining me," I whispered. Derek's eyes hardened. "We did what you couldn't. And if you fight us on this, you'll regret it." For a moment, the room felt like it was tilting, the walls pressing in. My house, my savings, my years of labor, they had stripped them bare while I sat at this very table, blind. The kettle whistled on the stove, a shrill, mocking cry. I rose, turned it off, and leaned heavily against the counter. The watch ticked on the table, steady as my rage. "You think money is all you've stolen," I said finally. "But you've taken something far greater." Amanda rolled her eyes. "Spare us the lecture." I ignored her. My gaze stayed locked on Derek. "You took my trust. My dignity. And once those are gone, there's no buying them back." For the first time, his jaw tightened, doubt flickering in his eyes. But Amanda leaned forward, her voice sharp as glass. "Sign the transfer, William. Make it official. Or you'll be left with nothing." I picked up the pocket watch, closing the lid with a snap that echoed through the room. "Nothing?" I repeated, my tone flat. "You've already seen what nothing feels like, and you're only at the beginning." I left the table then, the folder and forged checks still lying like traps in the lamplight. But as I walked away, one thought burned hotter than any fire. They hadn't just betrayed me in the moment. They had been draining me for months, piece by piece, dollar by dollar, trust by trust. And now the cracks were wide enough for the whole town to see. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Derek's voice downstairs, low but edged with anger. I lingered on the landing for a moment, listening. Papers rustled. Amanda muttered something about timelines and deadlines. The words didn't sound like family talk, they sounded like a board meeting in crisis. I descended slowly, the silver pocket watch cool in my hand. Its ticking reassured me, though each step felt heavier than the last. When I entered the kitchen, Derek was at the table, a neat stack of bills and bank statements spread before him. Amanda leaned against the counter, arms crossed, her smile thin and victorious. "Morning, Dad," Derek said, his tone too sharp to be casual. He pushed the pile toward me. "Recognize any of these?" I sat down, the chair creaking beneath me, and scanned the top page. My heart jolted. The electric bill, overdue. Insurance notices, cancelled. A letter from the bank about insufficient funds. "These can't be right," I murmured. "I paid every bill this month." Amanda chuckled softly, cruel amusement in her voice. "Did you, though? Because according to the bank, some of your payments didn't go through. Strange, isn't it?" I turned to Derek, searching his face for the boy I once knew. "What did you do?" He leaned back, folding his arms. "What I had to do. You've been careless for too long, Dad. We stepped in. We made sure things were redirected." Redirected? The word felt like poison in my mouth. Amanda tapped one manicured nail against the folder. "Don't act surprised. You've been struggling. We only did what was necessary. You should be thanking us." My chest tightened. "You forged my signature." Neither of them denied it. Derek's silence was answer enough. I reached instinctively for the watch, setting it on the table between us. The ticking filled the silence like a judge's gavel. "Do you have any idea what you've done? These accounts, this isn't just money. This is my name. My reputation." Amanda smirked. "Oh, please. Reputation doesn't pay the bills. Derek has plans. Investments. Real opportunities. You're just clinging to old ways that don't work anymore." I shook my head slowly. "This isn't about opportunity. It's theft." Derek slammed his fist against the table, startling even himself. "It's survival." The papers fluttered from the force, one sliding across the floor. I bent to pick it up and froze. A check, drawn in my name, but the handwriting wasn't mine. My stomach dropped. "How long?" My voice was low, cold. Amanda tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Long enough to know you wouldn't notice. You're too busy polishing that old watch." The insult burned deeper than I expected. She had reduced my last tie to Martha, the rhythm of my days, into a punchline. I held the check between my fingers, the ink glaring back at me like an open wound. "You've been draining me," I whispered. Derek's eyes hardened. "We did what you couldn't. And if you fight us on this, you'll regret it." For a moment, the room felt like it was tilting, the walls pressing in. My house, my savings, my years of labor, they had stripped them bare while I sat at this very table, blind. The kettle whistled on the stove, a shrill, mocking cry. I rose, turned it off, and leaned heavily against the counter. The watch ticked on the table, steady as my rage. "You think money is all you've stolen," I said finally. "But you've taken something far greater." Amanda rolled her eyes. "Spare us the lecture." I ignored her. My gaze stayed locked on Derek. "You took my trust. My dignity. And once those are gone, there's no buying them back." For the first time, his jaw tightened, doubt flickering in his eyes. But Amanda leaned forward, her voice sharp as glass. "Sign the transfer, William. Make it official. Or you'll be left with nothing." I picked up the pocket watch, closing the lid with a snap that echoed through the room. Nothing? I repeated, my tone flat. You've already seen what nothing feels like, and you're only at the beginning. I left the table then, the folder and forged checks still lying like traps in the lamplight. But as I walked away, one thought burned hotter than any fire. They hadn't just betrayed me in the moment. They had been draining me for months, piece by piece, dollar by dollar, trust by trust. And now the cracks were wide enough for the whole town to see. I carried the suitcase down the stairs the next morning, its wheels thudding softly against each step. The silver pocket watch rested in my coat pocket, heavy as truth itself. I had made up my mind, if they wanted me out, I would give them what they asked, but not in the way they expected. The kitchen was too quiet. Derek sat at the table, his face pale but determined. Amanda stood near the counter, her phone in hand, the glow lighting her smirk. Between them lay another folder, thicker than before, stamped with bold lettering from the bank. Derek gestured at it. Dad, before you go, there's something we need to finalize. I stopped at the doorway. What is it this time? Amanda's smile was sharp, rehearsed. Just paperwork. To make the transition smooth. You don't want loose ends, do you? I walked forward slowly, setting the suitcase against the wall. I pulled the pocket watch from my coat, flipping it open, letting the tick echo in the silence. And what kind of paperwork requires this much secrecy? The front door opened then, and a cold draft swept through. Mr. Collins, the local banker, stepped inside. His coat dripped with melted snow, his breath clouding in the air. He nodded politely to me but avoided my eyes. Morning, William, he said, his tone strained. Derek asked me to bring some documents. Just routine, he said. I glanced at Derek. His jaw was tight, his gaze hard. Amanda placed a hand on his arm as though steadying him. Mr. Collins placed the folder on the table and opened it. My breath caught as I saw the first page. It was a transfer of property deed, my house, the very ground I stood on, prepared for my signature. My hand clenched around the watch. Routine? I asked, my voice low. Mr. Collins cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. I assumed you knew. Derek assured me it was agreed upon. Amanda smiled sweetly. Of course he knew. He just needs a little encouragement to put pen to paper. I stared at Derek. You dragged him into this? Derek's voice was flat. It's business, Dad. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Business. That was what he called taking the home I had built, the walls Martha had painted, the garden she had tended with her hands. Mr. Collins looked at me finally, guilt clouding his eyes. William, if you're not comfortable. I'm not signing. My words cut the air like a blade. Amanda's smile cracked. You're being unreasonable. No, I said, slipping the watch back into my pocket. I'm being clear. The silence that followed was thick, broken only when Mr. Collins closed the folder with a heavy thud. His eyes flicked nervously toward the window, where curtains swayed from the open draft. And there, across the street, Mrs. Green stood again on her porch, arms folded tight against the cold. This time, she wasn't alone. Two other neighbors lingered nearby, their gazes fixed on my house. The sight struck me with sudden clarity, whatever was happening here was no longer hidden. Word had already spread. My son and his wife had tried to corner me in my own home, and now the community would wonder what sort of man Derek had become. Amanda hissed under her breath, "Close the blinds." But it was too late. The whispers had already begun. Mr. Collins gathered his papers quickly, his discomfort obvious. I'll leave these here. But William, don't feel pressured. This isn't standard procedure. He shot Derek a sharp look before slipping back out into the snow. As the door shut, Amanda rounded on me. Do you see what you've done? You've embarrassed us in front of the bank. Everyone will think we're failures. I lifted my suitcase and moved toward the door. No, Amanda. They'll think the truth, because the truth has a way of speaking louder than your lies. Derek stepped forward, blocking my path. His face was red, his voice trembling with rage. If you walk out now, don't expect to come back. I stared him down, steady, my hand brushing against the watch in my pocket. This was never about leaving, Derek. It's about what I take with me. He faltered, his confidence cracking for just a moment. Amanda whispered something in his ear, and he stepped aside reluctantly. I opened the door, the winter air cutting sharp against my face. Across the street, Mrs. Green and the others pretended not to stare, but I saw it, the curiosity, the whispers forming already. As I wheeled my suitcase onto the porch, Amanda's voice followed me, shrill and desperate. You'll regret this. I didn't turn back. The watch ticked in my pocket, steady as my resolve. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I stepped into the street, the cold air burning my lungs. For the first time in years, I felt strangely lighter, even as the world seemed to tilt beneath me. Behind me, their voices rose in anger, muffled by the closed door. Ahead, the neighbors watched, whispers spreading like sparks in dry grass. And in that moment, I knew the truth with chilling certainty. This wasn't my home anymore. The motel room was nothing more than four walls and a thin mattress, but to me, it felt like freedom. The hum of the heater was uneven, the wallpaper peeling, yet the silence was mine alone. No whispers, no demands, no ultimatums. Just me, a chipped desk, and the silver pocket watch ticking steadily by my side. I spread the papers across the desk, each one a piece of the life I had built and they had tried to steal. Bank statements. Insurance files. Copies of mortgage accounts. For years, I had let Derek handle none of it, believing he wasn't ready. Now I saw the irony, he had handled them anyway, by force, behind my back. But this time, I would set the terms. I flipped open my laptop, the glow casting long shadows across the faded motel curtains. My hands were steady as I logged into the bank portal, decades of muscle memory guiding me. I canceled the automatic mortgage payments with a few keystrokes. The screen blinked once, and it was done. The sound of the confirmation click felt like a trigger pulled, precise and final. I sat back, the pocket watch beside me, ticking in rhythm with my pulse. Next, I pulled the insurance documents closer. Derek had always assumed I'd cover everything, his car, his home, his emergencies. I called the company, voice calm, polite. Yes, I said, I'd like to remove an authorized user from my account. Effective immediately. The representative confirmed, and I closed my eyes, letting the relief wash over me. It wasn't anger driving me, it was clarity. For too long, I had been their safety net, their invisible foundation. Tonight, that ended. One by one, I cut the ties. Cancelled the grocery transfers Amanda relied on for her weekly shopping. Ended the utilities auto payments. Stripped their names from credit cards. Each action was deliberate, methodical, like a general moving pieces on a battlefield. The motel became my war room, the desk my command table, the ticking of the watch my drumbeat. For the first time in years, my account balance stared back at me untouched, whole. Mine. I leaned back, whispering into the quiet, for 30 years, I carried them. Tonight, I carry myself. I thought of Martha then, how she had begged me not to spoil Derek, how she warned me that giving without boundaries would one day hollow him out. I had ignored her, believing love meant sacrifice. Now I saw her wisdom too late. But perhaps not too late for me. The phone buzzed with a new voicemail. I didn't answer. I only let it play in the dark. Derek's voice, clipped with panic, "Dad, the mortgage bounced." "What the hell are you doing?" Amanda followed, her voice shrill, the insurance says we're not covered anymore. Do you know what you've done? I deleted each message without replying. Silence was its own weapon. The watch ticked louder, as if approving my silence. I returned to the desk, writing down each cancelled account, each cut line of dependency. By the time I finished, the list was long, stretching across the page like a map of liberation. I folded the paper neatly, placing it under the watch. Order restored, I murmured. Outside, snow fell thick and fast, blanketing the world in white. It looked peaceful, untouched, yet beneath, I knew, ice and jagged roads waited. Just like Derek and Amanda's lives now. On the surface, they had warmth, lights, possessions. Beneath, everything was cracking. I poured myself a weak cup of motel coffee, its bitterness biting but satisfying. For the first time in decades, I wasn't providing, I wasn't rescuing, I wasn't enabling. I was reclaiming. By morning, I knew, the calls would multiply. The panic would spread. And I wouldn't have to lift another finger to see the chaos unfold. I picked up the watch, wound it carefully, listening to the steady click of gears turning. Martha had given it to me on our wedding day, a promise that time was ours to share. Tonight, it felt like more than memory, it was judgment, reminding me that every second wasted on betrayal was a second stolen from dignity. As the watch ticked against my palm, I whispered to myself, they thought I'd bend. They thought I'd beg. But time, like truth, belongs to me now. I placed it back on the desk, the face gleaming faintly under the dull motel lamp. And as I lay back on the thin mattress, I smiled for the first time in years. Because by nightfall tomorrow, their phones would ring, their bills would bounce, and my silence would be deafening. By Wednesday, my phone was a graveyard of missed calls. 12 messages sat waiting by noon, 22 by nightfall. Each one more frantic than the last. The motel room was silent except for the hum of the heater and the steady tick of my pocket watch on the nightstand. I sat at the desk, sipping stale coffee, letting their voices spill from the phone one by one. Derek's first call was angry. Dad, the bank says the mortgage bounced. You need to fix this. Now. I deleted it with one touch. Amanda's followed, her tone shrill. The insurance is gone, do you know what you've done? We can't drive, we can't even get groceries without you. You're tearing everything apart. Another swipe. Deleted. By Thursday, their tone had shifted. Derek's voice cracked with strain. Dad, just talk to me. We can work this out. You can't just abandon us like this. Amanda's voice trembled now. The children are asking why the lights flicker. Do you want them to grow up remembering you like this? I let the phone fall silent, the watches ticking louder in the space between their words. For the first time in years, their problems weren't mine. Their chaos was their own, and I sat in the stillness, untouched. I walked to the window, pulling the thin curtain aside. Snow fell in slow sheets, coating the parking lot below. A neon diner sign flickered across the street, its hum steady, its light reflecting faintly off the watch on my nightstand. The world outside looked cold, but it was honest. No pretenses, no manipulation, just snow, silence, and survival. The phone buzzed again. This time, Amanda's sobbing filled the voicemail. Please, William. Please. Derek's trying, but everything is falling apart. You can't do this to us. But I could. And I had. That night, I sat in the diner across from the motel, the warmth of black coffee in my hands. The waitress, a young woman with tired eyes, poured refills without asking. Around me, locals talked in hushed tones, the kind of chatter that carried. Did you hear about Derek? One man murmured. Yeah, another replied. Word is, the bank's after him. House payments lapsed. Always thought he lived a little too big. I stirred my coffee slowly, saying nothing, but inside I felt the weight of vindication. The whispers had started, and they didn't need my voice to grow. Back in the room, I listened to the latest string of messages. Derek's anger had returned, sharp and desperate. You think this makes you strong? It makes you pathetic. You'll die alone in that dingy room, while we move on without you. Amanda cut in moments later, voice hard. You're destroying your own blood. Do you want your grandchildren to hate you? Because that's where this is going. Their threats rolled off me like water on stone. But Friday night, the tone changed again. A knock rattled the motel door. I froze, setting the watch gently on the table. Through the peephole, shadows moved in the hallway, 2 figures, their outlines familiar even in the dim light. Derek stood stiff, shoulders hunched, Amanda close behind him. The knock came again, louder this time. Dad, Derek's voice called, muffled but unmistakable. We need to talk. Amanda's softer tone followed, almost pleading. Please open the door. Just hear us out. I stayed still, my hand resting lightly on the watch. Its ticking felt louder now, filling the silence between their knocks. They were unraveling. The certainty that had carried them through their schemes was cracking, replaced by desperation that seeped through every word, every pounding fist against the cheap motel wood. I didn't answer. Instead, I whispered into the empty room, my words swallowed by the hum of the heater and the steady beat of the watch. Your time is running out. Another knock shook the frame. Another demand, another plea. And then silence, thick, heavy, expectant. I leaned closer to the peephole. Through the glass, I saw them both, faces pale, eyes wild, desperation carved deep into their features. They weren't here to negotiate anymore. They were here because their world was collapsing. And that was exactly how I wanted it. A sharp knock rattled the motel door. I froze, the sound vibrating through the thin walls like thunder. Through the peephole, I saw them both, my son and his wife, faces pale, eyes wide, desperation carved into every line. I let the silence hang before unlocking the chain and opening the door just a crack. The cold hallway light cut across their faces, harsh and unforgiving. Derek's jaw was tight, Amanda's eyes red from crying. Dad, Derek said, his voice brittle, we need to talk. Amanda stepped forward, but I held the door, forcing them to stay in the hall. You chose your voices when you left me voicemails, I said flatly. I heard enough. Her lips trembled. Please, William, just hear us out. Derek shoved his hands in his pockets, scowling. You're ruining us over some stupid pride. You think this is justice? It's cruelty. I slipped my silver pocket watch from my coat and set it on the small motel table in full view. Its tick echoed in the stillness, louder than Derek's anger. You gave me a choice, I said calmly. Obey, or leave. I left. And now you can live with what that means. Amanda's breath caught. We never thought you'd actually go. That's the problem, I said. You thought I'd always bend. You thought wrong. The air thickened between us, and for a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the motel's heater and the steady tick of the watch. Then Derek snapped, his temper breaking. You think you're clever? You think cutting us off makes you strong? All you've done is prove you're a bitter old man with nothing left. I leaned against the doorframe, unshaken. Better a bitter man with dignity than a thief who steals from his own father. Amanda flinched at the word. Thief? I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Derek. I spoke to Mr. Collins. Derek's face went still. He told me about the loan application, I continued. $50,000. Applied under my name. Using my house as collateral. Only one problem, the signature wasn't mine. Amanda's hand flew to her mouth. Derek, tell me that's not true. He didn't answer. His silence was louder than any confession. She turned on him, her voice trembling. You said it was all under control. You said your father knew. Derek's mask cracked, anger spilling through. I did it for us. For the family. He was wasting everything. For us? Amanda's voice rose. You lied to me. You dragged me into this. The hallway seemed to shrink, the motel's thin walls unable to contain their unraveling. I let their words bounce, their accusations claw at each other, while I stood silent, my hand resting lightly on the watch. You destroyed everything, Amanda hissed, tears streaking her face. Not him, you. Derek grabbed her arm, his voice sharp. Shut up. I stepped forward then, the door wider, my voice steady as stone. You fooled her long enough, Derek. But you can't fool the bank, and you can't fool the law. The paper trail is clear. The only question is how far you're willing to fall before you face it. His eyes darted, wild, cornered. You wouldn't dare. I would, I interrupted. And I already have. Amanda's sob echoed in the narrow hallway. She pulled away from him, pressing her back to the wall as though trying to distance herself from the man she had defended so fiercely. Derek's voice dropped low, dangerous. If you think you've won, you don't know me yet. I held his gaze, unflinching. I know enough. And so does she. The silence that followed was suffocating. For a moment, even the watch seemed to hold its breath. Then Amanda whispered, almost to herself, My God, you were lying to me all along. I closed the door slowly, the latch clicking into place, shutting them out. Through the wood, I heard their muffled argument continue, her voice breaking, his rising in fury. But one truth had already slipped into the open, louder than their shouting: Derek wasn't just greedy. He was a fraud. The next morning at the diner, whispers swirled louder than the coffee being poured. I walked in quietly, pocket watch in my palm, every eye turning as the bell above the door jingled. Did you hear? One woman whispered. About Derek? Yeah. Tried to take out a loan in his dad's name. Imagine that. Even Amanda's furious with him. Poor William, what that man's gone through. Their words weren't cruel gossip. They were judgment. And judgment, once it takes root in a small town, spreads like wildfire. I sat at the counter, ordered a coffee, and let the murmurs flow around me. For years, I had been the one whispered about, too generous, too blind, too soft. But now the spotlight had shifted. Derek's name was on every tongue, not with respect but with disdain. I lifted the watch, wound it carefully, the ticking steady and sure. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like a memory of loss, it felt like victory. And as I sipped my coffee, I knew, this was only the beginning. By Monday morning, my anger had cooled into something sharper. Not rage, not grief, strategy. I dressed with deliberate care, polished shoes, clean coat, silver pocket watch tucked in my breast pocket. The tick against my chest felt like a steady drumbeat, carrying me forward. I walked through the courthouse doors just after 9. The marble floors gleamed, the air smelled faintly of ink and dust, and every step echoed with quiet authority. For years, I had avoided places like this, believing family should settle matters at the table, not in front of a judge. But family had already abandoned that belief. I carried a folder thick with documents, statements, bills, checks, copies of forged signatures. Proof that my own son had crossed from betrayal into crime. At the clerk's desk, a woman in glasses peered up at me. Can I help you, sir? Yes, I said, setting the folder down. I'd like to file for eviction. And fraud. Her eyebrows lifted. Against whom? My son, I replied, my voice calm. And his wife. The words tasted bitter, but also final, like closing a door I should never have left open. She nodded slowly, sliding the forms toward me. Are you sure? I clicked open my watch, letting its steady tick fill the pause. Yes. I gave them every chance. This is my final boundary. I signed each page with a steady hand. Each stroke of the pen felt less like paperwork and more like cutting the cords that had bound me to their schemes. By noon, I was seated across from my lawyer, Mr. Harris, a man I'd known for years but rarely needed. His office smelled of leather and old books, walls lined with shelves of files that seemed to hum with authority. He leafed through my documents, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. "This isn't just carelessness," he said finally. "This is deliberate. The loan attempt alone could bring criminal charges." I nodded once. "I want them stopped. No more demands, no more forged papers. I want my home back." "You'll have it," he said firmly. "We'll process the eviction notice today. Sheriff's office will serve it within the week." He slid another document across the desk. "And this is a restraining order. To keep them from harassing you." I signed it without hesitation. For a moment, I stared at the black ink of my name, remembering how many times I had signed checks for Derek, school fees, rent, car repairs, every step of his life. My signature had always meant support. Now, it meant resistance. Mr. Harris closed the folder, sealing it with a heavy stamp. The sound echoed like a gavel. "By tomorrow, the sheriff will be at their door." I rose, slipping the watch back into my pocket. That's all I needed to hear. Before I left, he added quietly, "William, I've seen men in your position bend until they break. But you," he paused, studying me. "You're doing this with dignity. Don't let them shake that." Outside, the winter sun was pale, the streets lined with snow pushed high by plows. I walked to the sheriff's office next, watch ticking against my chest. Sheriff Daniels, a broad man with steady eyes, met me in the lobby. "I heard from Harris," he said. "Rough business, having to file against your own." "They left me no choice," I said. He studied me a moment, then nodded. "We'll take care of it. Papers will be served tomorrow. If they cause trouble, you call me directly." "Thank you," I replied. As I stepped back into the cold, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For months, years, even, I had been cornered by their demands. Now, for the first time, I was the one setting the lines. That evening, I sat at the motel desk again, the watch open beside me, ticking steadily as I read over copies of the legal filings. The folder was no longer just paper, it was armor. My phone buzzed with another voicemail. Derek's voice, loud and furious, "You'll pay for this, old man. You think the law's on your side? You're nothing without us." I let the message play, then deleted it. The watch ticked on, unbothered. Tomorrow, the sheriff would knock on their door. Not me. Not the neighbors. Not whispers. The law itself. And that knock would sound louder than any ultimatum they had ever given me. The following afternoon, I sat at the corner booth of the diner, a cup of black coffee cooling between my hands. Outside, snow flurries danced like restless spirits, carried by the bitter wind. The silver pocket watch lay open on the table, its ticking faint under the low hum of voices around me. The bell above the door jingled. Heads turned. Derek stormed inside, his coat unbuttoned, face flushed with anger. Amanda trailed behind, her mascara streaked, eyes hollow with exhaustion. Their entrance drew whispers before they even reached my booth. "That's William's boy, isn't it?" someone murmured. "Heard the sheriff served papers yesterday. Imagine, stealing from your own father." The words weren't loud, but in a small town, whispers carry further than shouts. Derek spotted me and marched over, slamming his hands on the table. "You think you've won? You've ruined us." I didn't flinch. I closed the watch with a snap, its sound slicing through his fury. "I didn't ruin you, Derek. You did that yourself. Amanda sank into the seat across from me, her voice breaking. The car's gone. Repo man came this morning. They said payments haven't cleared in weeks. Derek's glare shifted to her. Because he cut us off. She shot back, her voice trembling. Because you lied to me. You said the loan was safe. You said your father was on board. The diner grew quieter, the hum of gossip replaced by the silence of people listening. Even the waitress froze mid-step, the coffee pot trembling in her hand. I leaned back, my voice calm. The truth has a way of surfacing, Derek. And the community sees it now. They see you for what you are. His face flushed deeper, sweat beating at his temple. You'll regret this, he hissed, though the words sounded weaker than before, desperation bleeding into the edges. Amanda buried her face in her hands. The creditors won't stop calling. They said if we don't pay by the end of the week, they'll take the furniture. I can't, her sob cut off the rest. Derek grabbed her wrist roughly. Get a hold of yourself. The entire diner stiffened. No one moved, but every eye was locked on them now, judgment heavy in the air. I set the watch gently on the table between us, it's ticking steady. You built a life on deceit. And now it's collapsing. Don't blame me for the cracks, you carved them yourself. Amanda looked up at me through her tears, her voice barely a whisper. I don't even know who I married. Her words landed harder than any of mine. Derek's jaw clenched, his mask slipping entirely. For the first time, he looked small, cornered, fragile, exposed. The diner's silence broke in murmurs. Shameful. His poor father. Imagine what Martha would think if she were alive. Derek slammed his fist on the table, but it only made the whispers grow louder. He grabbed Amanda's arm and stormed out, dragging her behind him, the bell above the door clanging violently in their wake. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the waitress set the coffee pot down gently at my table. Don't pay him no mind, Mr. William. Folks here know the truth now. I nodded once, reopening the watch. Its second hand ticked on, steady, untarnished by the chaos outside. Time had exposed Derek's facade, stripped away the pretense of success and control. All that remained was a man unraveling under the weight of his own lies. I sipped my coffee slowly, the bitterness grounding me. I didn't need to say another word. The community had already judged. And for the first time in years, I felt the balance shifting back into my favor. Sunday morning, the church bells tolled across the frozen town, their sound carrying through the cold like a summons. I hadn't attended service since Martha's passing, but something inside me told me this was the day to return. I dressed in my best coat, polished shoes, silver pocket watch tucked firmly in my vest pocket. Its steady tick against my chest felt like Martha's hand guiding me. The church was warm, filled with candlelight and the low murmur of voices. Families shuffled into pews, children fidgeted, hymnals rustled. Heads turned when I entered. A few nods, a few sympathetic smiles. Whispers rose like a tide. Poor man, after all he's endured. His son, how could he do that to his own father? They say the sheriff was at Derek's house last week. I walked slowly down the aisle, every eye on me, and slid into a pew near the front. The pocket watch ticked softly in my hand as I bowed my head. Moments later, Derek and Amanda entered. The air shifted instantly, a ripple of tension spreading through the congregation. Amanda's eyes were red-rimmed, her head bowed low. Derek, however, walked stiffly, his chin raised as though daring anyone to look down on him. They slid into a pew across the aisle from me. The whispers grew louder, barely hushed. Look at him, acting like nothing happened. Poor Amanda, she looks broken. I heard creditors were at their door yesterday. Pastor Miller stepped to the pulpit, his kind eyes scanning the room. He opened with prayer, his voice steady, but even he could not quiet the storm of judgment swirling around Derek. Halfway through the sermon, Amanda broke. A quiet sob slipped from her, and heads turned. She covered her face, shoulders shaking. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his mask of pride slipping for just a moment. Pastor Miller paused, looking toward them. "The weight of our actions always finds us," he said gently, his words meant for all but cutting especially sharp toward Derek. "Repentance is not weakness. It is the only path back to dignity." The congregation murmured. I felt dozens of eyes flick from the pulpit to Derek, to me, then back again. Derek's face reddened, his hands clenching into fists. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, his voice loud enough for several rows to hear. "Everyone here is feeding on gossip." Pastor Miller's voice softened, but carried. "Truth does not need gossip to survive, son. It reveals itself." Amanda wept harder. A woman 2 pews back reached forward, touching her shoulder in comfort. No one reached for Derek. I sat straighter, the pocket watch ticking steady in my palm. For years, I had been the subject of whispers, too lenient, too trusting, too blind. But now, in this place, truth had reversed the current. The hymn began, voices rising in unison. As the notes filled the sanctuary, I felt something shift, not just within me, but in the eyes of those watching. Their gazes no longer carried pity. They carried respect. When the service ended, people gathered at the doors, their eyes darting between me and Derek. Mrs. Green approached, her voice low but firm. "We've all seen enough, William. Don't you worry, people know where the blame lies." Behind her, others nodded, murmuring agreement. Amanda slipped past quietly, avoiding my gaze, her shoulders slumped. Derek followed, but the pride in his stride was gone. His face was a mask of rage, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet mine. Outside, the cold air bit sharp, and I lingered on the steps, watch ticking in my pocket. Across the yard, Derek and Amanda stood alone, isolated, the congregation streaming past them with only cold glances. The whispers had turned into something louder, heavier, more permanent: judgment. I wound the watch slowly, the gears clicking into place. Its sound was steady, unbroken, while Derek's world fractured around him. As the last hymn echoed faintly in the wind, I knew the community had already chosen its side. And my son's dignity was no longer his to claim. Snow fell heavy that night, muffling the streets, but my motel room buzzed with energy. On the desk lay 2 objects side by side, my silver pocket watch, ticking steadily, and a manila folder Mr. Harris had delivered earlier that day. Inside was the proof I had been waiting for. I opened the folder slowly, pulling out a photocopy of the forged deed Derek had attempted to pass to the bank. My name sprawled across the signature line, but the handwriting was his, not mine. The loops, the angles, the slanted strokes, unmistakable. Mr. Harris's note was clipped to the page: "This is enough to proceed with criminal charges. He'll have no defense." I stared at the page, my hand resting on the watch. Time had recorded every betrayal, and now the evidence was written plain in ink. A memory flickered. Weeks earlier, Derek wandering my bedroom late at night, muttering something about looking for a pen. I had brushed it off then. But now I saw it clearly: he hadn't been looking for a pen. He had been searching through my things, desperate to mimic my hand, to steal what he hadn't earned. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound. My own son, forging my name, pawing through the few relics of my life like a thief in the night. But the pain didn't last. It hardened into resolve. I picked up the watch, wound it slowly, each click like the cock of a hammer. "You've stolen your last second from me, Derek," I whispered. The next morning, I met Mr. Harris at his office. The air smelled of paper and old books, the ticking clock on the wall a faint echo of my watch in my pocket. Harris laid out the plan with crisp precision. "We'll file charges immediately. Fraud. Forgery. Attempted theft. He'll face investigation, possibly jail. And the eviction stands. By next week, the house is legally yours again. I nodded. And the will? Harris's eyes flicked up. You're certain? Yes, I said firmly. Remove them. Every cent. Every property. Everything. His pen scratched across the paper, striking Derek and Amanda's names from the will I had signed years ago. Where do you want it to go instead? He asked. I thought of Martha, of her heart for the community, her constant refrain that love was not measured by blood but by respect. My voice was steady. To the veterans' charity. They'll honor it more than my son ever did. The moment the ink dried, something inside me shifted. The inheritance Derek had schemed and lied for, the home he had tried to steal, the savings he thought were his by right, all of it was gone. Not to him. Not to Amanda. Not to their children. To strangers who understood dignity better than my own blood. That evening, I sat again at the diner, the watch open beside my coffee. Whispers swirled louder than ever. Did you hear? The lawyers involved now. They say Derek forged his own father's name. Charity's getting the estate. Imagine, cutting your son out completely. The gossip wasn't cruel. It was justice taking voice. As I sipped my coffee, Amanda entered quietly, her coat wrapped tight. She slid into the booth across from me, eyes swollen, hands trembling. William, she whispered, tell me it isn't true. Tell me you didn't change the will. I met her eyes without flinching. It's true. Tears spilled over her cheeks. But, the children. What about them? I tapped the watch, the ticking filling the silence. Children inherit respect before they inherit money. Derek robbed them of both. She looked away, shame heavy on her shoulders. For once, she had no defense, no sharp retort. Just silence. When she finally rose, she said nothing. But the way she walked, small, broken, ashamed, was answer enough. Later that night, as I lay in the motel bed, I set the watch on the nightstand beside the forged deed. One true, one false. One symbol of time honored, the other of trust betrayed. And I knew, with a clarity sharper than any knife, tomorrow, the strike would land. Derek's schemes would collapse not with whispers, but with law, with judgment, with truth written in his own crooked hand. For years, I had carried him. Tomorrow, he would carry the weight of his own lies. The courthouse hallway smelled of dust and old wood, the air heavy with the weight of arguments and verdicts passed. My footsteps echoed as I walked, steady, each one timed to the tick of the silver pocket watch in my vest. Mr. Harris had asked me to come in person to finalize the filings. The eviction was already in motion, the fraud papers submitted, the will rewritten. Derek's world was collapsing, and today, it would crash in full view. I was halfway down the corridor when I saw them. Derek and Amanda stood near the benches, their faces pale, their clothes wrinkled as if they hadn't slept. Amanda clutched Derek's arm like a lifeline, her eyes swollen from crying. Derek looked older than his years, his pride stripped bare, his gaze darting with the wildness of a man cornered. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking. "Please. Don't do this." Amanda stepped forward, her voice trembling. "William, I beg you, don't let this happen. The children, they'll have nothing. We'll have nothing." I stopped a few feet away, the watch ticking in my pocket, steady against the trembling in their voices. "You made your choice when you forged my name," I said quietly. Derek shook his head desperately. "I was trying to build something for us, for the family. I didn't mean to hurt you." My hand brushed the watch, cool metal grounding me. "You didn't just hurt me. You betrayed me. You tried to erase me while I was still alive." Amanda's tears spilled freely. "We were wrong. Please, William. Undo it. Change the will back. Call off the sheriff. Just, give us one more chance. For a moment, silence stretched, the kind that seems to bend time itself. People passing in the hallway slowed, their eyes lingering, whispers beginning to ripple. A father, his son, a daughter-in-law, all playing out their shame in public view. I lifted the watch, opening it with a click. The ticking filled the space, louder than their begging, louder than the murmurs around us. You had years of chances, I said, my voice steady. Years when I paid your bills, carried your debts, covered your mistakes. And each time, I believed you'd change. But you didn't. You only learned how far you could push me. Derek's face crumpled, pride falling away, leaving only the boy I once carried on my shoulders. Dad, he whispered, I'm your son. I met his eyes, unflinching. And I was your father. But you stopped treating me like one when you chose greed over respect. Amanda sobbed openly now, collapsing onto the bench. Derek dropped to his knees in the hallway, his hands gripping the air as if trying to pull me back. Please. Don't let them take everything. Don't let the world see us like this. The world already was. Court clerks paused at their desks. Lawyers slowed in the hall. A woman whispered, that's the family everyone's been talking about. I closed the watch with a sharp snap, the sound cutting through their cries. The world sees the truth, Derek. Not because of me. Because of you. For a moment, Derek stayed on his knees, broken, Amanda weeping beside him. I could have reached down. I could have lifted him, undone everything, given him one more chance. But instead, I stepped back. Mr. Harris appeared from the courtroom doorway, a file in his hand. He looked at me, then at Derek, then back again. Are you ready, William? I nodded once. Yes. As I turned, Derek's voice followed me, raw and hollow. Dad, please. I didn't look back. The watch ticked in my pocket, steady, certain, final. For the first time, I wasn't the one begging. The courthouse doors swung open, and I stepped out into the winter light. The snow had stopped, but the air was sharp and clear, carrying every sound. Behind me, the echoes of Derek's pleading still clung to the hallway walls. Ahead of me, the community waited. They hadn't gathered by accident. Word had spread, about the eviction, the fraud, the will. In a town like ours, truth doesn't travel quietly. A small crowd stood on the courthouse steps and along the sidewalk, neighbors, church members, even the diner waitress. Their faces held curiosity, but also judgment, the kind Derek had once dismissed as gossip. Now it was a verdict. I descended the steps slowly, the silver pocket watch ticking steady in my vest pocket. Each click was a reminder, I had endured, I had resisted, and I had reclaimed my dignity. Mrs. Green stepped forward, her scarf pulled tight against the cold. William, she said gently, loud enough for others to hear, we're proud of you. It takes strength to stand against your own. Others nodded, murmuring agreement. Behind me, the doors opened again. Derek stumbled out, Amanda following, her face streaked with tears. Derek's shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. He looked out over the crowd and found no sympathy, no support, only stares that cut deeper than words. Please, Amanda whispered to the onlookers. You don't understand. But no one answered her. The pastor stepped forward from the crowd, his voice steady. We understand enough. Respect is earned, not demanded. And today, William reminded us all of that. The murmurs rose into something louder, more final. Derek shrank back, Amanda clutching his arm, both of them diminished under the weight of public judgment. I pulled the watch from my pocket and wound it slowly, the ticking clear in the silence that followed. The crowd's eyes followed the small motion, some smiling faintly, as though they too understood what it meant. This watch had started as a gift of love from Martha, had been mocked as a relic, had sat on the table during threats and ultimatums, had ticked through nights of betrayal and silence. And now, it was the symbol of my endurance, the sound of time restoring dignity. I looked out at the crowd, my voice calm but carrying. Family isn't blood. Family is respect. And dignity is the only inheritance worth keeping. A hush fell, followed by scattered nods, murmurs of agreement, even quiet applause. Derek's face burned red, his jaw tightening as though he might shout. But he didn't. He couldn't. Whatever authority he had once claimed was gone, stripped away not by me alone, but by the eyes of everyone he had tried to fool. Amanda tugged at his sleeve. "Let's just go," she whispered. And for once, Derek obeyed. They turned and walked down the steps, their figures shrinking as they pushed through the crowd. No one stopped them. No one offered comfort. They were alone now, stripped of the home they had tried to steal, stripped of the reputation they had squandered, stripped of the respect they had demanded but never earned. I remained on the courthouse steps, the watch ticking in my palm, steady and sure. Neighbors came forward, one by one, offering nods, small words of support. The waitress pressed a hand against my arm. "You did the right thing, Mr. William. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I smiled faintly. The truth has its own voice. As the crowd began to disperse, I stayed a moment longer, gazing up at the pale winter sun breaking through the clouds. The light caught the watch's silver face, gleaming bright. I closed it with a snap and slipped it back into my pocket. For the first time since Martha's passing, I felt peace, not because the betrayal no longer hurt, but because dignity had outlasted it. I had lost a son in blood, but I had regained my name, my standing, myself. And that, I realized, was the inheritance Martha would have wanted me to keep. I stepped down onto the snow-dusted street, the sound of the watch ticking softly against my heart, each beat a promise that time had not beaten me. It had restored me.